How's it going out there, guys? This is OCD for EDC, and today, what I've got for your face balls is the anticipated Ace Clyde. This is a knife, for those that don't know, this is a knife made by Giant Mouse. This is their Ace line, which means that it's pretty much a production knife. And it's a collaboration between Jesper Voxnäs and Jens Anso. And these guys have been around for quite a while. They're pretty well-known knife designers, and so yeah, they started Giant Mouse with a third partner. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but this is the box that it comes in. Nothing really special there. So the Ace Clyde. We'll get into a few size comparisons here, one of which I believe is pretty relevant. There it is against your Spyderco Manix 2. There it is against the Para 3 lightweight version. And then, really, the best comparison, I think, as you can tell by the size, is the Benchmade Bug Out. And honestly, I think this is really what they were kind of going for with this knife. This is maybe just higher quality, or, well, I'm not saying it's higher quality. I think the intention was for it to be higher quality than the Benchmade Bug Out. We've got really thin construction, deep carry pocket clip, however, not really mounted to be absolutely deep carry. Overall, it's a 7-inch knife, and so we're not talking about anything really huge here. But as you can see, blade thickness, we're in the same realm. The Ace is just slightly thicker, and we'll get into that. You can see here we only have a single-sided thumb stud, and pocket clip is not reversible on the Ace Clyde. So, yeah, I feel like they really could have thought that out much better. But anyway, let's get into it. So what we're looking at here is an overall length of exactly 7 inches. Unfortunately, we have a blade length of 3 1/16. So for any 3-inch legal lines, this is a 16th over, which is kind of unfortunate, I guess. I particularly don't live in an area where that's a problem, but for those that do, this one is just slightly over 3 inches, and you're looking at an overall handle length of 3 15/16. Thickness is 4/10 of an inch thick, so it is quite thin in that dimension. Blade thickness here, you got 115 thousandths stock, and as you can see, it's a really nicely crowned spine on this blade, which I do like that part quite a bit. It is kind of a Persian upswept design. And then we've got a flat ground, kind of a flat saber grind, and yeah, I guess I don't know that I'd necessarily call it quite Persian, but it is upswept, that's for sure. But anyway, flat saber grind, and honestly, I feel like they kind of missed the boat here, because behind the edge thickness on this guy is 25 thousandths. Now, it is consistent, it is well ground, it's just not really thin behind the edge. And for a small, lightweight knife like this, that's the one thing that I would expect it to do extremely well, is cut stuff. And 25 thousandths behind the edge is certainly nothing spectacular. Anyway, as you can see here, it came pretty well centered from the factory. I have not taken this guy apart. I have cut a few things with it. I have carried it very, very slightly over the last few days. As you can see, it's kind of hard for me to do left-handed. It does rocket right out with the thumb stud. It is a nice thumb stud deployment. However, it is not drop shutty at all. If I loosen that pivot up at all, the thing has blade play. So right here, it has no blade play, and you just have to walk the blade closed. I'm not saying that's a negative thing, I guess, for people that are looking for something that drops shut. this is probably not going to be the knife for you. However, during this video here, I am going to disassemble this knife, and maybe we can see why that's going on. Before we start tearing things apart, let's get a weight on this guy. So what you're looking at here, basically 2.5 ounces. So, compare that to the other lightweight models that we have going on. The Benchmade Bug Out, you're looking at just under 1.9 ounces, which is pretty spectacular for the Bug Out. And the Para 3 Lightweight. So we're looking at Para 3 Lightweight, territory on weight. But it pairs up pretty well with the Benchmade in size and shape and that sort of thing. So one of the interesting things about this knife, you do have a captured pivot on this side, because I did adjust this already, because when it did ship to me, it had quite a bit of blade play. So I ever so slightly tightened the pivot. I didn't have any issues with the cap or the non-tooled side spinning. But it is kind of interesting to me that they put that on the clip side and not the show side. I did choose to go with the micarta version here. And then you've got this orange backspacer that is aluminum. So on the pivot, this knife is made in Italy. And on the pivot and the body screws, instead of your standard T8, T6 construction, this guy is actually T9 and T7, which not really a big deal. There is a little bit of Loctite in there. So now I don't know if they were going for T8 and T6, but if they were, they missed the boat when making these screws, because T8 and T6 are absolutely sloppy in those holes. And yeah, my tools aren't wore out at all, so I know it's not my tools. This also happens to be a liner lock knife. Oh, there we go. So you can see it is nested liners. There's one of the micarta scales there. Let's flip this guy over. Oh. Huh. So they had to grind that, what was obviously a mirrored polished, kind of a half liner there. Had to grind that down for some fitment reasons. Let's pop that guy off there. If I can get it off. Now, I'm guessing they did these half liners. This was in an attempt to save weight. There we go. So there you can see we're riding on phosphor bronze washers, and you can see kind of some wear marks there on the blade itself. Now, this blade is, if I can show it off here, this blade is Elmax steel, which is kind of cool. You don't see it a ton. I do happen to really like Elmax. And there we can see the detent. It actually doesn't have a detent ball hole. It actually just hits that cutout there for the lock bar, or I'm sorry, for the blade stop. But we do have a detent ball ramp, which that's nice. So there we go. So you can see there all those grinding marks there on that liner, and they've done it a little bit there on that edge too. So they've really ground quite a bit on that guy. I mean, that's pretty aggressive. I'm not sure why they had to do that. On this side, you can see here we got some writing on the inside of the blade here, or inside of the knife, made in Italy. And you can see Vox and Anso. That's kind of neat. We got the Giant Mouse logo. So you can see here we got the blade stop. And that thing's really in there. And then On the pivot, you do have just a kind of a standard D-shaped barrel pivot. So, while I've got this guy apart, looks to be a steel detent ball. So, you know, pretty standard liner lock. I do like the fine jimping on the lock bar there. It just kind of looks nice, and you know, certainly feels nice. It's not sharp in any way or anything like that. And you certainly have got more than enough access and room to actuate the lock bar. So one of the things that I am going to do is get a strop involved here a little bit. Oh yeah. Yep, these washers are horribly sharp. And that's kind of what I thought was going to be going on here. And they are, the sides of the washers you can feel have just got a lot of burrs on them. So for anyone out there who doesn't know, you can take, I usually use a strop like this right here. Oop, bumping the camera. And use a strop with some compound to just polish the washers up. Phosphor bronze is not very hard, and so you can polish them right up and get rid of any burrs that are on these washers, and that should make this thing run quite a bit smoother. So you can see there we have a pretty polished washer. So do that on the second one here real quick. So, you know, I really like the look and the overall aesthetic of this knife. Now that I have it in hand, it really is a little smaller than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more on the level of the bug out, and it is similar, no doubt. But it just, I don't know, feels a little smaller. It is a little not quite as tall, even though the Benchmade bug out is thinner. It is a little bit taller, and the blade is longer. So there is that. So I feel like we've got those washers kind of shined up there. So we're going to grab a little bit of oil here. Clean these surfaces off real quick. Now we only have a D shape on the lock bar side liner, but I think I am going to put the lock bar in the other direction just to have it, the show side, be more presentable. The other thing that I think was kind of a mess, you can see how far that screw sticks through the liner. That's certainly visible when the knife's assembled down into where the knife nestles. Not that it's a huge deal, it doesn't hit the blade or anything, but it's just kind of ugly. You know, just not something I'm hugely in love with. You know, I like the knife, but it's definitely not something that I think is, you know, oh my God, you better go out and get one of these. Certainly if you really like this guy, then by all means I would recommend it. I think it's certainly a nice knife that is worth the money that they're charging, especially with LMAX steel. And I'm just finding out here, let me verify this. So what I was doing off camera there, I was just putting the pivot into that other scale, but it looks to be, yeah, the pivot diameter is slightly larger than the screw, so it has to go in this direction. That's kind of a bummer. So anyway, we're going to throw down just a little bit of KPL here. Throw a little on the pivot itself. There we go. Throw a little on here. Now, on the blade, I'm going to throw just a little bit on this detent track. All right. There we go. Now, I always put you can kind of feel the washers, which way they were stamped. I always put the smooth side towards the blade. Now, that's just me. Somebody else might have a differing opinion there. It just seems to work out well for me. So that's what I'm going to do here. But, yeah, you can do that however you would like. I don't know that there's a real appreciable difference one way or the other. So these body screws are quite tiny. Get some of these started here so we're not losing everything. So I'm sure you guys saw here in the video that this thing does have a deep carry wire style pocket clip. Thing pocket's really nice. You know, the clip's done well. It is quite a bit tighter than your standard Spyderco wire clip, but I kind of like it. You know, it's not hard getting in and out of the pocket by any means. It's just a little bit different. The tension on it's just a little bit higher, and like I said, not a bad thing, just slightly different. Let's see if okay, so we still have tons of blade play, and actually the pivot is sticking up just a little bit, so I don't think we're totally seated here. There we go. Now the pivot's seated. Certainly much smoother. There's no blade play, so maybe I can back this off slightly. Just a touch. This thing seems to be real susceptible. You can see here we're centered. For anyone's wondering, the noise you may be hearing in the background is my dog walking around with his toenails scratching the floor. But anyway, oh yeah, much smoother. Certainly I can shake it down, but it's definitely, you know, I don't know if it'll break in more over time, if it'll ever be kind of a drop shutty kind of affair, but it definitely is much smoother than it was. I would actually kind of put it on the level of kind of like a Reeves, you know, with the way that you got to kind of shut him. It's kind of a more hydraulic feel, if you will. You just got nice kind of steady pressure or tension all the way closed. Thumb stud does work. Like I said, it's great. It rockets right out, and that part's great. So yeah. So there's that wire clip I was talking about. Of course, lanyard hole, for what that's worth. I don't know who still does lanyards, but yeah. So anyway, I just thought it was kind of a cool knife, something interesting. And yeah, giant mouse, ace, Clyde. There is the man, the myth, the legend. All right, guys, have a good one.